Ms. Ocasio Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you holding this hearing. I think just first and foremost to each and every one of you, I just want to say, firstly, that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you all are going through the things that you're going through. I know that I understand and have experienced not all of what you all are experiencing, but some of it. When I was 16 years old, my father was diagnosed with a rare form of lung cancer. He was in experimental trials in order to save his life. My family almost lost our home in order to try to keep him alive and just try to keep our family together. A lot of folks, you know, many people know that I was working in a restaurant when I got elected, but they don't know why. And the reason why was because we lost my father to a rare form of lung cancer. We couldn't find treatment for him. And so the other thing that I want to say too is that none of this is your fault. And so often we are made to feel guilty for the things that we cannot afford when there is no reason that our treatment should be this expensive in the first place. One of the things that I wanted to kind of get at is this idea that all these drugs should be as expensive as they are right now, because I don't think that that is true. Ms. Skipper, you said that with your insurance, your insulin is $1,000 a month. Is that correct?
Yes.
When insulin was first developed, the patent was sold. Do you understand? Do you know the story?
Yeah, for $1.
For $1, right?
Yeah.
That's how much the patent for all insulin was sold for. Mm-hmm. Do you know the reason why it's $1,000 with insurance for you?
No.
Neither do I.
I have no idea.
And frankly, I don't think corporations understand. Well, I don't think corporations will give us a reason why. A lot has been made about how much money has been spent on research and development. Between 2006 and 2015, about $465 billion was invested in research and development. I think every dollar put into research and development of pharmaceuticals is a good dollar spent. But let me see, Mr. Mitchell, are you familiar with stock buybacks?
I know what they are.
And what is a stock buyback?
It's when a company decides to purchase shares of its stock in order to drive up its stock price. So
between those roughly 10 years, $465 billion was spent on research and development. The amount that pharmaceuticals spent on that same time to buy their own stock for the sole purpose of driving up the price was $516 billion. So they spent more than their entire budget on research and development on a tactic to drive up their own stock price. Stock buybacks used to be illegal in this country. And once they were made legal, they were allowed. And one of the things is that when a company buys their own stock, it drives up the price of their stock. And something that's not talked about is that CEO pay is tied to stock price. So CEOs right now are not incentivized to invest in research and development. They're incentivized to raise their stock price. So, you know, there's a lot of debate as to what can be structured, whether we can go single payer, whether we maintain our insurance system the way that it is, how you make it more competitive, whether you don't, et cetera. But I think one very clear thing that we can see, Mr. Chair, is that if we eliminated stock buybacks, we could reduce the cost outlays of insurance company or pharmaceutical companies by at least half when you compare just research and development and the stock buybacks alone. And again, I just want to thank each and every single one of you for sharing your stories today, because there is no reason for a drug as simple as insulin, which costs $21 in Canada for a 10 milliliter bottle, to cost the equivalent of a mortgage payment or sometimes 2 mortgage payments. And with that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Meadows. Thank you very much, Mr. Ocasio Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, there's been a lot of talk today about how improving healthcare opportunities for American families will lead to all sorts of dystopian outcomes, right? There's this idea that we're going to be rationing care. So I'm curious for those of us here to raise your hand if you have been uninsured in your life. Keep your hand raised, and also raise your hand if you've been insured, but your deductible was exceedingly expensive. So almost you rarely went to the doctor or got care that you needed. Thank you. I've been there too. I was uninsured less than a year ago. I was uninsured 7 months ago. And so I want folks to raise your hand again, because I know what being uninsured is like. It's not just a financial issue, it is the stress and it is the anxiety when you wake up every morning and you don't know if you're gonna slip on a curb, if you're going to find something on your body that you want to get checked out, if your knee starts to ache. Everything becomes a spiral of anxiety because you don't know how you're going to afford it. So when we talk about rationing care in a for-profit healthcare system with no guardrails, where it's the Wild West, where you're allowed to profiteer off of insulin, off of people's lives, how many of you, in your time of being uninsured or having healthcare that was too expensive, delayed getting a prescription or delayed going to the doctor? So you rationed your own care. Is that correct, Ms. Burton?
Yes, absolutely.
The cost of a for-profit insurance company forced you to ration your own care, correct?
Absolutely.
I know exactly what that's like. I rationed my own health care for 10 years. I was on a self-imposed wait list for 10 years, not going to an orthopedist when my knee hurt, not going to seek mental health care or counseling when my father died, all of those things. You know, what you shared with us, what you had the courage to share with us, Ms. Burton, about your miscarriage, about the fact that you were forced to that you had a miscarriage in the middle of an emergency room, and you said you were uninsured in that time, right?
That's correct.
You were uninsured, so you miscarried in an emergency room, and you never were able to get the follow-up care that you needed. You never knew what happened to your baby, correct?
That's correct.
Because insurance was too expensive, correct?
That's correct.
Because CEOs needed to offer a profit margin, correct?
Correct.
This right here is a complete condemnation of the for-profit healthcare insurance industry. Because while they're talking about how socialized medicine, how a public guarantee to the right to healthcare will force us to ration care, we are rationing our own care. We're not talking about months-long waiting lists under the system we have now. We're talking about years-long waiting lists for the system that we have now. I'll move on quickly. A key part of the ACA, Mr. Asasi, is Medicaid expansion, correct?
Yes.
This allows people of lower incomes, Medicaid expansion allows people of lower incomes to essentially get covered by Medicaid, correct?
The very most vulnerable people in this country.
And that is a core part of the Affordable Care Act. Now, there are some states that have not opted in to this expansion.
That's right.
I've looked in, some of these states include the states that have chosen to not cover, to not expand care to our lower income Americans that are most vulnerable, include Alabama. Is that correct, Mr. Asasi?
That's correct.
Florida?
That's correct.
Kansas?
That's correct.
Mississippi?
That's correct.
Missouri?
Correct.
North Carolina?
Correct.
South Carolina?
Correct.
Oklahoma?
Correct.
South Dakota?
Correct.
Tennessee?
Correct.
Texas?
Correct.
Wisconsin?
Correct.
Wyoming?
Correct.
These are the states that have chosen not to cover the most vulnerable Americans, correct?
That's right.
And these are the states that are also, we're seeing a lot of their representation trying to combat the ACA when they're not even buying into it to protect their own, correct?
We're talking about 2.5 million people who don't have coverage because they have not expanded Medicaid.
Why do you think they are doing that?
Well, I used to work with the governors on this very question, and the truth to that answer is because it was tainted as Obamacare, and it was a completely political decision.
So people are not getting insurance in these states for political reasons. That's your assessment?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ms. Ocasio Cortez, people are dying and getting sick. I will now go to Mr. Gosar.